The despicable and horrific attacks in Paris last month, the question of whether the government's proposals for military action in Syria strengthens or undermines our own national security must, Mr. Speaker, be at the centre of our deliberations. There is no doubt that the so-called Islamic State group, Mr. Speaker, I have given way quite a lot of times already. There are 157 members who wish to take part in this debate, and so I think I should try and move on and speed it up slightly, which appears to meet with your approval, Mr. Speaker. There's no doubt that the so-called Islamic State has imposed a reign of sectarian and inhuman terror in Iraq, Syria and Libya, and there is no question that it also poses a threat to our own people. The issue now is whether extending British bombing from Iraq to Syria is likely to reduce or increase that threat to Britain, and whether it will counter or spread the terror campaign ISIL is waging across the Middle East. The answers don't make the case for the government motion. On the contrary, they're a warning to step back. A vote against yet another ill-fated twist in this never-ending war on terror. Let's start with the military dimension. The Prime Minister has been unable to explain why extending airstrikes to Syria will make a significant military impact on the existing campaign. ISIL is already being bombed by Syria or Iraq, by the US, France, Britain and Russia, and other powers. Canada has, interestingly, withdrawn from this campaign and no longer takes part in it. During more than a year of bombing, ISIL has expanded and lost territory. ISIL gains included the Iraqi city of Ramadi and the Syrian city of Palermo. The claim that the superior British missiles will make the difference is actually quite hard to credit when the US and other states, as an intervention said earlier, when the US and other states are struggling to find suitable targets. In other words, extending British bombing is unlikely to make a huge difference. Secondly, the Prime Minister has failed to convince almost anyone that even if British participation in the air campaign were to tip the balance, there are credible ground forces able to take back territory now held by ISIL. In fact, Mr. Speaker, it's quite clear there are no such forces. Last week, the Prime Minister suggested that a combination of Kurdish militias, the Free Syrian Army, would be able to fill the gap. He even claimed a 70,000-strong force of moderate FSA fighters were ready to coordinate action against ISIL with the Western air campaign. That claim has not remotely stood up to scrutiny. Kurdish forces are a distance away in the sunny Arab areas where ISIL controls, nor will the FSA, which includes a wide range of groups, few, if any, would regard as moderate and mostly operate in other parts of the country. The only ground forces able to take advantage of a successful anti-ISIL air campaign are stronger jihadist and Salafist groups close to the ISIL-controlled areas. I think these are serious issues that we need to think through very carefully, because I believe that's what the Prime Minister's bombing campaign could lead to. This is why the logic... Mr. Speaker, I will give way later on in my contribution, but I think I should be enabled to make what is, I think, an important part of this contribution. This is why the logic of an extended air campaign is, in fact, mission creep. And Western boots on the ground, whatever the Prime Minister may say now about keeping British combat troops out of the way, are a real possibility. Thirdly, the military aim of attacking ISIL targets in Syria is not really part of a coherent diplomatic strategy. The UN Security Council Resolution 2249, passed after the Paris atrocities and cited in today's government motion, does not give clear and unambiguous authorisation for UK bombing in Syria. To do so, it would have had to be passed under Chapter 7 of the United Nations Charter, to which the Security Council could not agree. The UN resolution is certainly a welcome framework. For joint action, to cut off funding, oil revenues, arms supplies from ISIL. But I wonder how much signs there are of that happening. I'll give way to the member there.
For giving way. Myself and the honourable member don't agree on very much, but on the necessity to cut off their oil supplies, I do very much agree with him. Therefore, I'm afraid I'm at a complete loss as to understand why he would oppose airstrikes, which are such a crucial part in targeting oil supplies, which are providing funding for ISIL and Daesh.
The problem is the oil supplies that are being sold by ISIL are going into other countries, into Turkey and to other places. And I think we need to know exactly who is buying that oil, who is funding that oil, what banks are involved in financial transactions which ultimately end up with ISIL, and which other countries in the region may or may not be involved in it. Despite, Mr. Speaker, the clear risk of potentially disastrous incidents. The shooting down of a Russian military aircraft by Turkish forces is a sign of the danger of a serious escalation of this whole issue that exists around the world. Fourthly, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister has avoided spelling out to the British people the warnings he's surely been given. The likely impact of UK airstrikes on the threat of terrorist attacks in the UK. That's something everyone who backs the government's motion should weigh and think about very carefully before we vote whether or not to send RAF pilots into action over Syria. It is critically important, Mr. Speaker, that we as a House are honest with the British people about the potential consequences of the action the Prime Minister is proposing to us today. I'm aware that there are those with military experience, including members on the benches opposite as well as this side, who have argued that extending UK bombing will, and I quote, increase the short-term risk of terrorist attacks in Britain. We should also remember the impact, Mr. Speaker, on communities here in Britain. Sadly, since the Paris attacks, there's been a sharp increase in Islamophobic incidents and physical attacks. I've discussed these with people in my local mosque in my constituency, and it's horrific. Surely, Mr. Speaker, the message from all of us in this House today must go out. None of us, let's say this together, we will not tolerate any form of anti-Semitism, Islamophobia or racism, any form in this country. The Prime Minister has not offered a serious assessment, in my view, of the intensified air campaign on civilian casualties in ISIL-held Syrian territory or the wider Syrian refugee crisis. At least 250,000 have already been killed in Syria's terrible civil war, 11 million made homeless, and 4 million forced to leave the country. Many more have been killed by the Assad regime than by ISIL itself. Yet more bombing in Syria will kill innocent civilians, there's no doubt about that, and turn many more Syrians into refugees. Yesterday, I will in a moment. Yesterday, I was sent a message from a constituent of mine who comes from Syria. I'm sorry, it's not funny. It's a family who are suffering. His name, Abdulaziz Al-Mashi, and I quote from his message. I'm a Syrian from Mabij city, which is now controlled by ISIL. Members of my family still live there, and ISIL didn't kill them. My question to David Cameron is, can you guarantee the safety of my family when your air forces drop bombs on my city? It's a fair question from a family who are very concerned. The government's proposals for military action in Syria are not backed by a clear and unambiguous authorisation by the United Nations. It does not meet the 7 tests set down by our own Foreign Affairs Committee. and it does not fulfil 3 of the 4 conditions laid down in my own party conference resolution of a couple of months ago. The past week, Mr. Speaker, voice has been given to growing opposition to the government's bombing plans across the country, in Parliament, outside, in the media and indeed in my own party. And I believe it's a consideration of all the wars that we've been involved in the last 14 years. These matters were debated a great deal during my own campaign to be elected the leader of the Labour Party, and many people think very deeply about these matters. The light of the record of Western military interventions is one that has to be analysed. British bombing in Syria risks yet more of what President Obama, in a very thoughtful moment, called the unintended consequences of the war in Iraq, which he himself opposed at the time. The spectre, Mr. Speaker, of Iraq, Afghanistan and Libya looms over this debate. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm not giving way. I'm going to carry on with my speech. Mr. Speaker, to oppose another war and intervention, in my view, is actually not pacifism, it's hard-headed common sense, which I think we should be thinking about today in this House. To resist ISIL's determination to draw the Western powers back into the heart of the Middle East isn't to turn our back on our allies, it's refusing to play into the hands of ISIL and what I suspect some of them want us to do. Is it wrong for us here in Westminster to see a problem, pass a motion, drop bombs and pretending we're doing something to solve it? That's what we did in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya. And I ask the question of the House of this, has terrorism increased or decreased as a result of all of that? The Prime Minister said he was looking to build a consensus around the military action he wants to take. I don't believe he's achieved anything of the kind. He's failed, in my view, to make the case for another bombing campaign. All of our efforts should instead go into bringing the Syrian civil war to an end. Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, I ask members to think very carefully about the previous decisions we've made. All those members that have applied to speak do get called. And I conclude with this point, Mr. Speaker. In my view, only a negotiated political and diplomatic endeavour to bring about an end to the civil war in Syria will bring some hope to the millions who've lost their homes, who are refugees, who are camped out in various points all across Europe, dreaming of a day that they can go home. I think our overriding goal should be to end that civil war in Syria, and obviously also to protect the people of this country. That is why, Mr. Speaker, I do not believe that the motion put by the Prime Minister achieves that, because it seems to put the emphasis on bombing now, whereas I think the emphasis should be not on bombing now, but on bringing about all our endeavours, all our intelligence and all our efforts. I think it's very strange that members don't seem to understand. There are millions who watch these debates who want to hear what's being said, don't want to hear people shouting at each other. So for those reasons, Mr. Speaker, I urge members on all sides of the House to think very carefully about the responsibility that lies with them today. Do we send in bombers, not totally aware of what all the consequences are going to be, or do we pause, not send them in, and instead put all of our efforts into bringing about a peaceful, humanitarian and just political settlement to the terrible situation faced by the people in Syria?